Okay, so in this next video, the task is to talk about my experience of engaging with services, which is it's going to be a fairly short one for me actually, because I have a lot more experience being on the other side, being the service that people are trying to engage with, and trying to be part of that as a clinician and as part of a service, working out how to help people engage with us. The help that I got through work. It was in this year. It was in these months after I knew that I needed to get help, but I didn't quite know what to do. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know if we could afford for me to get therapy. All of those kind of things that were reasons why there was reasons why I wasn't going to do it, or reasons why I kept on putting it off. And then an email came around from my work basically saying that there is this occupational health, there's this staff wellbeing opportunity available. You can automatically have up to 6 sessions of counselling through this, if you need to, and it's self-referral, and we won't, all that kind of thing. And I think, it was following up on that, bit frustrating that, they talk about having 6 sessions, and then the first step is to have a telephone screening, and it turns out that's one of your 6 sessions, and it's not with the person you're going to go on seeing and everything, which I personally think that's a bit of a rubbish way of putting things, but maybe that's just me with my professional hat on. But yeah, then I guess I was able to. I spoke to this woman. That was really weird. It's really weird how, so they clearly have this like telephone triage kind of idea. So I spoke to this woman for about half hour. We'd arranged a time she would call me. And that wasn't good actually, because I knew that I knew that this was the first step for me in opening up and opening myself up, and that step in me accepting I needed help and taking the steps to get help. But I could tell, again, possibly because I'm a professional, I could tell that her job was to establish whether I needed that help or not, and what kind of help that needed to be, and whether they could do it, and all this kind of stuff. And so I was trying really hard to say what I thought was the issues for me and what was going on, and I didn't feel that, because we only had a half-hour conversation, and clearly that's all the time that she had allotted to give to me. I kind of got to the end of that, and again, I was just, I cry a lot, or I cry a lot in the story anyway, and I remember just lying on bed and sort of sobbing for sort of like 10-15 minutes, and all of that horrid feeling was probably, I think that was probably the worst. It really started a new period of low for me, and went worse from there on. The problem being that after that conversation, I then needed to see a different therapist, face-to-face therapist. I needed to work out how that was going to work with my work hours and my home commitments and all of that kind of stuff. And it actually ended up being a couple of months before my counselling started, from having that conversation, mainly because I was, we had a family holiday planned that meant I was going to be away for 2 weeks, and because I was only going to have 5 sessions with this counsellor, he was saying, well, it's best to start when we can have that consistent thing going on. And actually that period, even though I'm not actually complaining about the service I received, but I'm just aware that period of sort of like 3 months or so between first telling my story to a professional, and then getting to engage with somebody who was really going to help me, because the first person, she wasn't there to help me, she was there to work out whether somebody else could help me. That period was actually the worst period for it, and I think, again, for me personally, highlighting the fact I was going to access services almost made it, brought to light quite what was going on for me. And again, it makes me question, because I've been part of services where what we do is we have an assessment and then try to signpost on, and this is it's an incredibly frequent thing in mental health services. There's probably a majority of services of one sort or another work in this way, although my most recent team doesn't, thankfully, but where you do an assessment and then establish, this person does need help, okay, and then there's a mini waiting list to find the right. And actually, I've never been quite so aware of how hard that period would be. But I was really lucky because this was available through my work. I was lucky because I was able to make use of a fairly short intervention. Now, because I'm a clinical psychologist, I've done so much work around self-awareness. We have things called reflective practice groups throughout our training. You have your clinical supervision, and it's beholden upon you to develop a self-awareness. So I had a pretty good framework of understanding my psychological patterns, or many of my psychological patterns. I knew about the traps. I knew about where things from my family history and my childhood, my background and so on, informed the way I am now. So I had quite a detailed framework for understanding that. What I didn't have was a linkage between that whole framework and the way I was feeling. And what happened was that while this blackness, this darkness was overwhelming me, really, I had all of this feeling going on, and there was no linkage for me between that and this. And so I was just overwhelmed by that. Now, what the counselling did for me was it enabled me to actually remember this stuff, draw the two together, and go, oh, okay, right. So in fact, there is. I can see where this has come from, and in fact, because I know that, I can see something different about where my life is now from what all that kind of stuff. Now, so I was incredibly lucky that 5 sessions was enough for me, because actually what I needed was not building this. I just needed to link those two things together. I don't know what would have happened if I didn't have that, and I suppose that's something that is really interesting, because I was in a workplace where I had 5 sessions paid for, after which I would have had to pay for anything else myself. I don't know how well I would have been able to access NHS services and so on. And I think so. I've been very lucky that way. I've been, frankly, quite very privileged that way. I don't know what would have happened for somebody who was feeling like I was, but didn't have that knowledge, that intellectual knowledge to fall back on, to draw together with the emotional experience and so on. So I think that's again something that I'm just very aware of being important for me to be grateful for. By the way, I'm sorry that wasn't short at all.